Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros. Excuse me, Derek Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going live for a special broadcast. I'm doing an interview with fellow researcher and journalist Spiro Skouras, who some of you may be familiar with. We're going to get into that in just a moment. I usually don't do the interviews live. I usually pre-record them, but I know that there's lots of you out there who follow both of our work, and I asked for questions earlier on Twitter and on Facebook and YouTube and got a lot of good responses. So I figured, why not do this conversation live? But before we talk to Spiro, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com. This is where you can find all of my content. You can download my books for free, check out the free documentaries we've been producing, all of our podcasts, and of course, follow us on alternative social media platforms, because although we are broadcasting live right now via YouTube and several pages on Facebook, at any point, these channels could be taken down, as likely Spiro's as well, and many other content creators that you guys keep up with. So please follow on Float, follow on Minds. You can join us over on Hive if you like the blockchain. I've got a text list running. I've got a Telegram channel. And of course, my videos are on BitChute and on Library. So please don't wait for them to delete me and then forget about my work or Spiro's work. Make an effort to follow the people who you appreciate, so that we can continue to share information with you as we move forward in this crazy, crazy post-COVID world. But we're going to go ahead now and bring on my guest, Mr. Spiro Skouras. How you doing, brother? Am I saying it right?
Yes, I'm great, Derek. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. It's I think this conversation has been a long time coming. I've been a fan of your work now for a little while, and I know that a lot of my audience listens to your show as well. So I figured there's some crossover, and maybe we could just talk about some interesting things. So before we get into all that, I'd like to give you an opportunity to shed a little bit of light on your background, as far as, your journey towards journalism and activism and everything you're doing now, and how long you've been doing it. I know that I've heard you mention you had a previous YouTube channel before the one you have now, right? That was deleted. So maybe just give a little bit of background before we get into some of the topics you've been covering.
For what it's worth, my background, I mean, I'm just a regular guy. I work a regular job in addition to doing the reports that I do. I did take some time off from my full-time career and just did news full-time for NewsBud a few years ago, and did that for a little while. But I started basically at a pretty young age. I was about 13, and my dad gave me a book by James Perloff to read, and it was the Shadows of Power and the Council on Foreign Relations, and it was about the Trilateral Commission, and it kind of just really blew my mind. I mean, I kind of was always suspicious of, but I mean, so that really helped, of course, my environment around me growing up. And I was always interested in what's really going on, never really having I was always skeptical, I would say, of the official stories, because oftentimes it's just, more often than not, it's garbage. So I was always active, around me, people. I would always try to engage in conversations with people and try to share things with them. And then that kind of just developed into being inspired by individual content creators on YouTube. And, I decided just to make my own channel. And some of those videos, were probably pretty rough, because, I mean, I just was like brand new to actually creating the content. And so over the years, I've kind of honed in those skills a little bit better. But that was, pretty much it just developed. I had that YouTube channel. It grew pretty quick, and then felt the censorship, that we're all experiencing now. And they did remove that channel a few years ago. But luckily, I have this one here going, and it's getting some good attention, putting out some good reports and some good interviews, some great guests.
Yeah, you've been doing just fantastic. And I want to say that, so I did see that you had worked with NewsBud before. I wasn't aware about your work then, but I became aware, I think maybe like lots of people in the audience, just in the last 6 to 8 months during the COVID crisis. You've been doing a great job reporting on different aspects. And if I'm correct, I believe that you were one of the first people to, at least in video form and in a major way, put out information about Event 201. And then I think the same thing as far as me coming across it with the Great Reset. So I know you've been doing great work on both those things. Those are topics that I've covered in article form and videos as well, but you really have just done a good job with that. So I appreciate that. And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation. I mean, I want to eventually get into some of the stuff you've done with Ghislaine Maxwell, and talking about obviously COVID-19, the technocracy, and everything we're seeing rolling out right now. But let's talk a little bit about your views on the Great Reset, kind of how you came across this, and just your thoughts on where we are in that whole thing.
Well, the Great Reset was almost pretty much expected some type of a form of an announcement of the solution to this crisis. I think we were all kind of just waiting for that to see what exactly they were going to roll out to be their solution to this problem, reaction, solution crisis, which I think it fits that Hegelian dialectic to a T. And the Great Reset really isn't something that's new. It's been a plan. Klaus Schwab, the executive director of the World Economic Forum, he wrote a book about this quite some time ago. I mean, this is something that they've been working on for, I think it's something like 50 years. I mean, they've really been trying to implement the framework for this new paradigm. And essentially, that's where we're at. We're at the point right now where the global infrastructure is in place and the technology is there to reshape and reimagine humanity and our lives. And that's some of the language that they use, and the Great Reset, I mean, essentially it's the technocracy. It's the technological and scientific dictatorship of these ruling elites, these people who meet at Davos every year and set global policy essentially. And everyone's on board with it. All of the major corporations, mega corporations, all of the central banks, all of the governments, essentially, the United Nations, of course, is partnered with the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, of course. So this is a huge overarching agenda that was essentially being established already incrementally for generations, getting us ready for this moment when they're ready to basically go live. And they even say themselves that the threat that this COVID crisis, those are their words, the threat that this crisis, basically they're going to use this as an opportunity, a great opportunity. The head of the IMF said this, they're all these big players are saying this. And so they don't want to let this crisis go to waste, essentially. And they're going to use it to transform every aspect of our life. And they even talk about merging man with machines these are videos on the World Economic Forum's own YouTube channel about how there'll be a day soon to where we won't be able to distinguish what is organic life and what is artificial life. And it's going to be a part of us. It's going to change who we are fundamentally as humans. And so these are the social engineers setting this agenda for us. We don't get a say essentially in this. So this is, the time is coming now. I mean, they are rolling this plan out very quickly, and it all connects. Basically, we're all going to be tied into the grid, essentially. That we're seeing the cashless society being rolled out. We're seeing the immunity passports and the health passports and the digital vaccination records and the smart cities and basically it's all going to run on 5G and AI. That's going to be the operating system. And that's why they're so desperate to control the narrative at this point, and why we're seeing the censorship just, incremental. Just explode, not incremental. It's used to be much more subtle, and now it's much more blatant. They're outright, just today, for example, Twitter will not allow you to post any BitChute links, trying to just keep everyone on the YouTube platform, which is controlled, of course, by the technocrats there at Google. But I don't want to keep ranting. I could keep going, but
No, I understand. No, you covered a lot of ground there. So let me just throw out a few thoughts to you. For one, I totally agree that, like you said, it used to be incremental, piece by piece, so that people couldn't really notice. Now it's just like a race to the finish line, and still we're at a place where a lot of people don't seem to notice it. I will say, in my experience, and maybe you have something to add to this, that it does seem like this event is causing certain people to start questioning things that weren't previously questioning things. I don't want to say it's waking everybody up, because there's a lot of people who are totally bought into it, but people who maybe prior would be more dismissive are now starting to question things. But I guess it works both ways, because, people who maybe you would think be the kind of people who would stand up are now falling for it one way or the other, whether left, right, or whatever. So there's a lot of people who are mixed up. And in the midst of that, like you said, they're calling this the Great Reset. I was showing on the screen a moment ago an article I wrote for the Last American Vagabond about this. And like you said, it was Klaus Schwab. You had Prince Charles. You had, the head of the IMF. And Klaus Schwab, for those who don't know much about him, he was a steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group. He's part of this, these globalist organizations. He's in line with the same message. And of course, the eugenics model that hides behind people like Bill Gates and a lot of these topics. So I do think, we had a comment a moment ago. Somebody said, well, what are we going to do about it? And that's kind of one of the questions I want to pose to you. I mean, obviously, none of us have the perfect answer, but I do know that you, like myself, I see you try to encourage your audience to really push back against this. We need to stand up. We need to assert our rights. And you yourself saying, I do not consent. And I want to talk about that a moment because, the Great Reset, the details are important. But at the end of the day, what people need to understand is that you can call them fascist, socialist, communist. I think it's beyond that. It is technocracy. But either way, whatever name you give it, it's central planning. It's central planning, top-down control over every aspect of our lives. And moving to the digital life, the fourth industrial revolution, is going to make it much easier for them to track and trace and to lock us out. Like, for example, with COVID, this just in the last couple of days, the LA mayor here in the US has said that, they can cut people's power off if they're gathering in too large of groups, if they're violating, the gathering rules and social distancing and all that. So the reason that's allowed to happen, or one way it's easier, I'll say, is because of smart meters, because of the smart grid. Now they can just turn you off. Before, they would at least have to send a guy to your house to come disconnect you, and you might be able to stand up and say, hey, we're not letting that happen here, protect your your power or whatever. But the point is, that's why they want us on the grid, so they can lock us out and control and try to use social engineering to dictate which way the world goes. So I guess my question to you is, how can the listeners here, we've got several hundred people watching and tuning in, I'm sure more later, they're looking for answers. I've been trying to spin it in the terms of a great reset probably needs to happen because the world is really fucked up in a lot of ways. But the difference is the way that these people want to do it is they want to be in control of every aspect of our lives. They want to tell you whether you can drive or not. I believe fully in everything being voluntary. I think that there are a lot of unsustainable systems that exist in our world, and I think that's clear. There's problems, but as we know, the predator class, they exploit them and they twist them for their own reasons. And I just think that if a great reset is already set in motion that they have initiated, and the world does need mass change, and we all recognize that, then perhaps it's time for us to start stepping up and deciding, are we going to be the ones who guide this reset, as individuals, not this collective good that they're pushing that we're seeing with COVID. So, just any ideas, thoughts on that, and things you could share with the people who are really looking for answers right now.
Well, I think that people, going back to what you were saying earlier, that this event, this series of events really seems to be kind of shaking people out of their slumber to a certain degree. A much larger group of people internationally are really feel and sense and can see that something is not right here. Something else is going on. And so that is encouraging that that's more people are seeking to find out what is going on here, and so that's why the work that you do and so many others that do is so important to offer and provide that alternative viewpoint, which is needed. That's why, of course, I think it's obvious that we are seeing this massive increase in censorship on all platforms, or most platforms, especially the big controlled ones. So that's a positive element that has come out of this. Is more people are waking up, absolutely, and we are looking for that solution. And I don't think, unfortunately, that it's like a one-size-fits-all silver bullet type of solution, because this is a wide-ranging, multifaceted agenda that has been slowly in the works and built around us. This system of control has been built around us for our entire lives, trying to shape us for our existence from the cradle to the grave, essentially. So, I think that in addition to like what you're going to be out doing tomorrow, hitting the streets and handing out flyers for Exposed Bill Gates Day, that's one aspect. But I think overall, it's a topic, a subject that you cover a lot here on your channel, and you're talking about, decentralization. You want to decentralize yourself as much as possible from this control grid, in every way possible. You try to become more independent from this system of control. They thrive off of the control. How many millions of people are out of work right now and are depending upon the state to take care of them. That's just one example. The long bread lines. There's a major problem potentially with the food coming up here. It was famously said by Henry Kissinger, control oil and you control nations, control food and you control people. And there's other great people out there like Ice Age Pharma, who's really focusing and zeroing in on this subject, which affects all of us, is extremely important, because we saw with the great toilet paper shortage of 2020 how quickly things that we take for granted can change, and how people may be clamoring, fighting each other, literally beating the hell out of each other to get the last roll of toilet paper. Imagine if it was the last roll of bread, and how desperate people would become in that scenario. So I think overall, any form of resistance, we have to not comply. We have to engage in civil disobedience, nonviolent. I'm not saying, go take up arms at this point or anything like that of the sort, but at the same time, we need to resist in every way we can. It has been mandated in my county for, I don't even know how long now, that you have to wear masks. I have not worn the mask a single time. That's one aspect of civil disobedience, that you can, not comply and everything. And yes, of course, the majority of the people are wearing the mask, but not everybody is wearing the masks. And so when they see you, for example, not wearing a mask, yeah, some people might get upset about that, but other people might be encouraged by that, or, inspired by that. To them, I have seen it myself. I've been in the grocery store, have seen someone look at me who they were wearing a mask. I wasn't, they took theirs off, So, I know that's not going to solve all our problems right now, but it's, every way we can, we all have a part to play in this. And there is a hell of a lot more of us than there is of them, and this is why they try to keep us divided and conquered. They want to keep us fighting about whatever, race, religion, politics, when at the same time, we're all being targeted by this system of control, this system of oppression, that in every day we do nothing, we get one step closer, one day closer to potentially no turning back. Once they start, coming out with the Neuralink and merging man with machines and start mandating these vaccines or something, people need to really consider, what are their lines in the sand? They need to have these discussions with their families, with their friends, have a plan, be prepared, don't get caught flat-footed and just think, oh, it can't happen here, because 7 months ago, or 8 months ago, or whatever, we would have never, imagined we would be in this position we are right now. So time is running out. And, I think that the people are much more powerful than they believe. They want you to feel alone. They want you to be isolated, locked in your house, feeling like there's nothing you can do. When I think that these are the type of discussions that we need to be having more often. And I thank you, Derek, for bringing this up and having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And great answer there. And again, I want to remind everybody who might be new to this channel, if you haven't heard me talk about exactly what Spiro is talking about there, what I call freedom cells, some people call them hubs, hive circles, call it your tribe, call it your militia, call it whatever. But the idea is getting together, small groups of people, 7 to 8 people coming together, share skills, share ideas, and prepare for emergencies. That could be a weather emergency. It could be, the money's worthless. It could be anything. But the idea is to be prepared for anything, like you said, not getting caught flat-footed. And I had somebody comment to me recently on social media when I was mentioning something along these lines. And they said, so you want me to turn into a prepper? And they said it kind of in a derogatory way. And my response usually to this is, for one, why is it seen as something that's bad to be prepared? Because that's all the word prepper means, is somebody who is prepared, right? And every single one of our ancestors, no matter what part of the planet you come from, survived and got us here by preparing, by planning ahead for the winter and thinking, more long term than I think most of us do in the present. And I think that's unfortunate. So it shouldn't be seen as unusual to plan and be prepared for any sort of situation. Like you said, 8 months ago, we wouldn't imagine that they would be having checkpoints in different states in the United States, seeing where people are coming from, checking their temperature, threatening to shut people's powers off, putting ankle monitors off. All the things that have happened are part of this new normal on the way to the Great Reset. And the only thing I think besides opting out, as you mentioned, that's typically my solution. But I think also we do need active acts of non-compliance. And whether it's the mask, which may seem small, but I agree with you, man. It's those little things that when somebody sees that, they look over and they're like, oh, well, maybe I don't need this either, and they were just a little too nervous to go in and try to push the boundaries. But we feel that connection to another human being when we see somebody standing up and just standing for what they believe in. And, it's a really scary thing to see, though, that there are people out there who do support the idea of the coming mandated vaccine, or think that people should be fined for, having gatherings or for not wearing masks. Like here in Houston, where I'm at, now it's $250 fine. If you're out in public anywhere in the city, you could potentially be ticketed just for being outside. So we have that sort of thing, but then we also have people who are like our neighbors, our friends and family, who believe in these ideas. And I don't know if you can see the screen right now, but I'm showing an article it's an op-ed from the USA Today. It just came out today or yesterday, excuse me. And quite disturbing. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. I actually tweeted this out earlier this morning. Unbelievable, written by these two doctors and whoever this other guy is here. But yeah, please proceed.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to go over this with you because this is kind of what we're talking about here. This is just how disturbing it is. Like you said, it's two doctors and some other guy. We have to look into who they are, who they're connected to. I wouldn't be surprised to find a Bill Gates connection. But it quite clearly, they're just basically saying that, it's important to note that there's, no way to get herd immunity without a vaccine. Basically, that's kind of what they're saying. And then they go beyond that and say we need severe penalties for non-compliance. The kind of things that we were just talking about encouraging people to do, standing up for yourself, those sort of things are going to get you penalized if these guys have their way. And you should rest assured that they're not alone. They're not the only ones who believe this way. So they believe America should make the vaccinations free and easily accessible, exempt only those with medical contraindications to immunization, do not honor religious objections, which I thought was pretty huge. And then they link to something claiming that major religions do not officially oppose vaccination, which to me, it's like you can be a Christian, a Muslim, a Jewish person, whatever, but that doesn't mean you necessarily agree just because some official church somewhere says, hey, this is what we believe. You know what I mean? It's just, that seems like another central institution trying to speak for the people. Do not allow objections for personal preference. And then, of course, even better, how can they ensure compliance? Vaccine refusers could lose tax credits or be denied non-essential government benefits. Health insurers could levy higher premiums for those refusing to get immunized, as it is the case for smokers. Of course, private businesses should refuse to employ or serve unvaccinated individuals. Schools refuse to allow unimmunized children. Public and commercial transit. I mean, this is what we've been saying they're going to do and telling people. And I mean, I kind of laugh because it's disturbing, but it's right here in our faces. The only legal limitation on how government or private action is that it's not be discriminatory. And it's hard to see how discrimination would occur if vaccinations were free and accessible to all. So they're kind of making the argument that, well, if we make them free to everybody, then they can't argue discrimination. It's real backwards arguments. And of course, they get into immunity passports and being able to have to show those everywhere you go and be tested often. I mean, what do you think of this and the fact that this is so in our face now?
It is absolutely in our face, and we're only a couple months potentially away from the vaccine hitting the streets at this point. President Trump at this point has also stated multiple times that he will deploy the military to deliver the vaccine. I wish there was a little bit more clarity on the definition of delivery, what that means. Are they just going to load it up on the trucks or trains and ship it to the cities? And I mean, or they're going to be having tents set up at Walmart's parking lot. We don't know yet, but we will find out soon enough, I'm sure. And this is brazen. This is out in the open. They are literally not only, I mean, I don't think punishment is, they're talking about punishing people who don't get vaccinated. I don't think punishment is a strong enough word for what they're doing here. This is like ransom, blackmail, forcing people, holding their jobs over their heads essentially, and basic services, that we have come to, accustomed to here in our cultures. And it's just, and the media is just pushing this. USA Today offering up their platform, their millions of readers for this op-ed, this opinion piece, and which says in tiny little letters, op-ed. If you're not looking for it, it's real easy to miss. So I mean, this is the agenda. This is the agenda to roll out this vaccine, and like you're right, Derek. We've been saying they're going to limit your ability to participate in society by blackmailing you into taking this vaccine and terrifying you into taking this vaccine. They're going to tell you how dangerous all of this is. And that's all we've been hearing for months now, of course. And, as we approach what potentially is a perfect storm here with the presidential elections taking place in November, the vaccine may be ready to hit the streets at that point in time. This is flu season. This is when we're supposed to, supposedly get this second wave. Bill Gates has already warned about pandemic 2 being much worse, and so there's who knows what the remainder of the year has in store for us. And it is it could be much crazier, I think, than the first half of the year as we are approaching a perfect storm potentially.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I'm in Houston right now, but I had been in Mexico for a couple of months, and I'm trying to get back there pretty soon to continue on. Basically, my vision is to try to find somewhere that's a little bit relatively more free, that isn't as far along on the technocracy as the U.S. is at the moment, and try to get some safety established there and figure out how to help those who are here, and you know, how to fight back eventually, of course, if these things don't turn around. I am optimistic somewhat, like I said earlier, that we can come together and direct where this great reset's going to go, and what exactly is going to happen. But I mean, it is very disturbing just to see, you know, where we're at, because I don't know if it's the same for you, but I mean, I've been doing this for going on 10 years now, like activism, actively trying to do something, not just sort of knowing things are screwed up and just watching it happen. And this is the kind of thing that you saw in the distance, that this is the belief, like this is where we're headed if people don't wake up. That's why we're doing things. We're trying to talk to people because we don't want this to happen. And then it's this surreal feeling that this is a reality. We're living it right here. It's right here. It's right now. It's rolling out. This is like 9/11 traumatizing people every single day for months on end, with fear, with division, with even those of us who see what's coming, or some are paralyzed by, oh my God, it's happening. I don't know what to do. I can't do anything. And I just want people to see that first. I think the reason both of us do what we do is to educate ourselves first, but to share that with the world, to try to get truthful information out there. Because once you have that information, then you can make a choice. You can decide what you want to do with your life. You can decide what's the best mode of action for your family. What I was getting to earlier is I'm trying to think ahead with sort of not getting out long term, but getting out somewhere to put a safe foothold, because I do believe the next step is part of this. And this is what we've seen talked about with the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is something akin to a social credit score, which is already sort of happening in subtle ways. I wrote an article about this 2 months ago, how companies are already using not just credit scores for how you spend your money and your debt, but your social media and other aspects of your life that are already being used to judge you for jobs and things of that sort. And apparently at least 30 to 40% of people, Americans, I think 25 to 45, have been turned down for jobs and loans based on things they put on social media, and they don't even have any idea the scores out there existing and judging them. So I think that once you combine that with this mandate for vaccines, and as this USA Today opinion piece said, like, deny people the access to stores, deny them access to work, to travel, keep their kids out of school. The only way, I believe, unless we can stop that from happening, is to see this as an opportunity to start living more in line with the lives that I think many of us want. Now, we all have differences of opinion and lifestyles, but the point is, we don't want the boot on our neck. We want to live something where maybe we all respect, you know, hey, whether we disagree on things, you have the right to live as you choose, as long as you don't use violence against me, and we can live in peaceful coexistence. You know, it's like, why don't those of us who want that, and who do not want to be injected with forced vaccines, and who do not want to become a part of this technocracy and upload our brains or whatever else, opt out and start building the world that we want? And I think that's where we're at now, is that we have to compete with them directly. I don't think voting is going to fix this. I don't know where you are with voting in the elections. I mean, I think that coming to the election, like you said, something doesn't feel right. You know, it never feels right, because it's always a divisive time. But I know Whitney Webb did some great articles talking about the election, and this Israeli company running simulations showing smart cars getting hijacked and running into people at polling places, and the election getting canceled, all kinds of crazy stuff that, who knows, it could come true, like some of the simulations we've seen since 9/11 and before. But I think we really have to be proactive. I wanted to get to another topic here, to a couple more topics, but this kind of relates. I saw that you were, or your dad actually was on the Richie Allen show and shared a story with him about, I guess, his experience. Your dad was in the military. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your dad and that whole thing?
Thanks, Derek. Yes, my dad, Richie Allen, he had his show, a weekly show, and he did the call-in line there. And so my father called in, and he's been, researching this stuff for 30 years. And I'll kind of get into how he began researching this. But obviously, he played had a major impact on my awakening, if you want to call it that. Just being around, just talking, reading the books, sharing the books, all this kind of stuff. So he was in the Marine Corps, and this was in the early 80s. And in the call, he discusses two different aspects about being in the Marine Corps. And one of them was, of course, we know that the military are used as guinea pigs. Essentially, they're government property for, experiments, or whatever. They've been doing this. This is on record. They've done this throughout history. And they also load them up with vaccines. And one of the vaccines that was administered to him, he got extremely ill right after it, pretty much. So much so to where he thought he was dying, essentially. And he disobeyed orders and went into the medical area of the base, like they're telling him, sir, what are you doing? Get back in formation or whatever. And he's just like, I believe his exact words were, just shoot me in the back and put me out of my misery. Like I think I'm dying right now. And so he goes in there, sees them. He was out of it for a few days, and actually doesn't remember. I think he said 2 or 3 days from this experience. And they thought they weren't sure if he was going to make it, to the point to where that the military actually called my grandparents, which are of course my father's parents, to notify them that they may need to come down to see him, essentially. So he ended up recovering to, a degree, right? And was able to speak with the doctor afterwards about what happened, what was attacking him, what was killing him. And they said, I believe it was like microplasm or something like that, and which is a man-made substance, and it created and formed scar tissue in his left lung and essentially gave him pneumonia, and he almost died from it. And so essentially, he was injured severely by the vaccine. But that was, at one portion of his career in the military. And then towards the end of his career in the military, he decided that he was not going to re-enlist. And but he was told to go participate in an anonymous survey at a special part of the base that you normally would go to, and so he had to put on his dress uniform and everything and go in there. And once he arrived in the building, he did not recognize any of the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers there, his superiors, and they gave him the questionnaire, and a lot of it was pretty general, pretty basic, asking, would he take orders from a NATO commander or from a UN commander and this and that. And since they had already done a lot of joint training, it wasn't like out of, the ordinary for them. So he's saying, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, because they're already training together and everything. Anyways, they're being conditioned, and trained that way. And on the last page of the anonymous survey, the questionnaire, the question was, if the U.S. were to repeal the Second Amendment, if you were ordered to fire on U.S. citizens, would you obey that order? And then it gave like a list from a U.S. commander, NATO commander, and UN commander, kind of a thing, like a multiple choice thing there. And of course he said no, but he said that was shocking to him, as I'm sure it may be shocking to people listening and hearing this story for the first time, is to think that would be a question for an anonymous survey in the military back in the 80s, asking about if the U.S. repealed the Second Amendment, would the troops fire on American citizens who refused to give up their guns? That really is what woke my dad up, that, hey, what is going on here? And then that sent him into his 30-year, research that he's been engaged in since then. And so it's always a powerful story that whenever I hear it, it still blows my mind when I was listening to him live on air on the Richie Allen show when he told that story this week.
Yeah, it was a great story. I appreciate him sharing that. And I'm sure that there are other veterans that have similar things to offer, that have been in those situations, and maybe some choose not to speak up, or maybe they speak privately to their families and things of that sort. I've had folks tell me that over the years where, their father or grandfather, whoever, might not necessarily be an activist out in the streets, but they sort of tell them like, hey, this is what I know based on my experience. You need to be careful. I even had, when I started to wake up in 2010, speaking of like the older generation, my grandparents were some of the first people that I started telling everybody I could when I first started questioning things. It was watching some documentaries, reading a few books, and everything was different. And then I ran into my grandparents. They were in town, and I started telling them like, hey, have you guys heard of the Federal Reserve? Have you heard of, all this different stuff? And they were very much like kind of patting me on the head, like, oh, okay, finally one of our grandsons knows what's going on, sort of thing. And I showed them some of the books I was reading, and my grandpa, who is now passed, he basically looked at that. It's like books talking about, the banking system, talking about secret societies, talking about just this interwoven connection that goes on behind the scenes. And he just sort of told me softly, like, you need to be careful who you show these books. Not everybody's going to understand, and it was just, I remember that so clearly because it was right as I was just starting to open up to this world. And then, they shared some other things with me, but it's just interesting how these older generations, whether your father or people even before us, can see how much things have changed. And especially like my grandmother's in her mid 80s now, and the world that she's seen change even just in the last 8 months is something that, again, her growing up, they saw that this was happening. They thought it was, long in the distance. And many of us thought we had a few decades, but I mean, Agenda 2030, it's 2020. You know, I mean, we're here. It's time for them to really roll things forward. I saw somebody mention Australia, and I guess I just want to get your thoughts on Australia. What you think about that? Like how far people should go when trying not to comply if they're coming to your door, if they're literally, you know, shutting power off. Like, I mean, I know that we're not here to advocate violence. Of course, I'm all for self-defense, of course, and people should do what they need to do to protect their families. But how do we prevent that from happening in the United States? How do we prevent them from going full on door to door? Like, you know, what can people do to try to intervene here? You know, other than just making a phone call and an email, begging the politicians hoping that they're going to care. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's tough, right? Because like we said, this system is being built around us. Like the significance of 5G rolling out is essentially 4G connected everybody. 5G is going to connect everything, right? This Internet of Things that's being built around us, that's going to continue, you know, to spy on us and surveil us. And as you're pointing out, you know, they can just start flipping the switch. Oh, you know, Derek didn't get his booster shot this month, so you know, we're going to limit his, you know, whatever, you know, his power or whatever. He reached his food intake for the month, so we're going to shut him off, you know. So anyways, it's coming to this. I mean, and this is what Agenda 21 is, especially, you know, it's they want to move everyone out from the rural areas, the kind of areas where you and I might want to live, and try to pack us into these smart cities so we can be easily controlled, obviously, you know. And it's tough. I don't want to try to tell people what to do, because I mean, it's not my place really, you know, but at the same time, it's a discussion we need to be having. Like, you know, hey, this is happening. What do we do? This is what we're all wondering right now. So, of course, the civil disobedience, but, you know, and becoming independent, but, you know, trying to get off of that grid, trying to hold out from being on that grid, and the smart cities, the smart meters on the side of your house and everything like that. So it's a really tough call. But like we said earlier, people are going to have to draw that line in the sand of how much crap they're going to take, you know, and then ultimately, you know, there's that famous quote, the amount of tyranny one will live under is the exact amount that people will accept. And so, you know, there's a lot of truth there. But ultimately, if you are going to try to engage in activism, locally is the best way to do it. You know, I don't think that you're going to, you know, you don't start from the top down. You got to start from the bottom up. And what we have seen, like in my state, for example, these are the people who are making the decisions that are directly going to be impacting the lives of me, my family, and the people in my community. Because it's not the federal government, and I'm not trying to defend the federal government here at all. You know, we all know the problems that the federal government beast system has, but it's the local government here. They're the ones who have the language of the mandatory vaccine that was included in the Declaration of Emergency here in the state of Arizona. So that's the governor right here in Arizona who signed off and authorized this emergency declaration. You know what I mean? So it was the county that enacted the masks mandate. You know, so these are people within our communities are the ones. Of course, they're abiding by a larger game plan, a larger goal and everything, but these are the ones who are implementing it here. These are the people we're seeing in the grocery store or, you know, wherever. Those are the ones that are making the decisions. I think that acting locally is the best place to start, no doubt about it.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. Start as local as possible, because the way I tell is, you know, through the internet we get to reach all kinds of people across the world, and that's great. I love having friends and family connected through the internet. But when it really comes down to it, like for example, what's going on in Australia, I know people over there. And we've done interviews and we've talked and we've supported each other, but I can't physically be there to help them protect their home from whatever's going on door to door. And if they're surrounded by a bunch of statist, you know, obedient, mindless people who just for whatever reason are following the government edicts, then you're in a dangerous spot. You know, if you're surrounded by people who think not only that they trust the government fully, but then they've been conditioned to think that you and your crazy friends are the problem. You guys just won't get vaccinated. You won't just wear your mask, you know. That's a dangerous place to be. We need people to get organized as locally as possible. And if at all, I do definitely encourage people, start trying to put up flyers in your neighborhood, on your street. And, you know, we got to get past maybe some of our discomfort and our insecurities even to realize that we're in a very unique, unprecedented situation right now. This is like, if there was ever a time to try to reach more people and get more people questioning, this is it, because you might not have many chances after this. But let's switch gears now for one final question we'll start to wrap up is, I know you did some work around Ghislaine Maxwell when she was first arrested. I think you called, I don't know how many calls you made, but I know you did try to call to see the facility where she was being held. And I want to hear more about that, and maybe you could share about that. But also, I don't know if you saw this Newsweek piece that was, I guess, a response to everybody asking, how come we haven't seen a mugshot? How come, it's just appearing via video link, and there's like a courtroom reporter drawing of her or something that we're supposed to believe. And essentially it just said, well, it's not normal practice for law enforcement to always put out mugshots unless there's some police related motive or something like that. But I mean, we have newspapers where you can see all kinds of people's mugshots who are arrested, every week here in Texas. There's, we got Epstein's. There's so many clear examples where that is the norm, but it was just a very dismissive, like, hey, this is why you haven't seen her face yet. So I want to hear more about, you calling the jail, and then do you think she really is locked up, or just, your sort of thoughts and opinions on that matter? You're muted, brother.
Thanks, Derek.
Yep.
Sorry about that. So, the whole thing it's a very peculiar case, to say the least. There was a lot of questions regarding whether she is actually locked up, especially towards the beginning. Those questions probably still some would be asking right now. And, so that's what prompted me to contact the facility that she was being held at. And it was, of course, on a holiday weekend, right when it was the announcement was made and everything. So it was, extended weekend, it's closed down, all this kind of stuff. So it was tough to get through, but I was able to contact the automated directory, which, according to the robot I spoke to on the phone, and they had her in custody, and it listed her age, her name, and it's just a short little video. I actually made it I was only going to post it on Twitter, and that's why I kept it right at that 2 minute mark, 2 minute, 20-second mark. But it actually, I decided, you know what, let me just throw it on YouTube anyways, so I did. But so that was supposedly confirmation there. Make it what you will. Obviously, there's a lot more going on behind this story than what the press will ever tell us, especially in connections with, intelligence agencies. There was Acosta had stated this years ago when he basically gave Epstein that sweetheart deal and didn't give him federal charges, just local charges, which was basically a get out of jail free card. It was ridiculous, the double standards there. But he said it himself when he was being vetted for the White House, that he was told that he was above his pay grade, that he was connected to intelligence, and to leave it alone, essentially. That gets swept under the rug. And I think that that's a pretty bombshell admission there that did come public. And so, those same questions would still, of course, apply to Miss Maxwell as well, and you look at who her father was, and so there's a lot of questions here, and it's kind of like, why now? Why is this timing? It's really interesting. Is it, a limited hangout? Is it going to be on a limited hangout, which is probably what I would be leaning towards? I mean, I doubt we'll ever know or hear the official, what really happened, how deep the rabbit hole really goes. I mean, that's going to be up to people like you and Whitney Webb and the many others out there who are doing the work. They're hitting the grindstone, digging, doing the research, putting out the information. So, it's, I think when Epstein was locked up, we all kind of almost half jokingly were saying, he's basically going to be suicided. Like I remember specifically one day the power went out in Manhattan, just like it did whatever it was today or yesterday. And Epstein was in that Manhattan jail. And I put out a tweet saying, quick, somebody check on Epstein. So I mean, that's like a half joking thing. And then it was like a month later he was dead. So who knows how this Maxwell thing is going to play out. I think that the people deserve to know the truth. I think the victims deserve to have justice and to see the truth. And I think that we need more transparency, no doubt about it. And I think that the people have the right to see, the court hearing and everything. And there was an interesting statement, some kind of a rule change or something that took place in New York. I believe it was in April of this year, where they announced that they will no longer be providing the public images of mugshots, essentially, which took place, right before it was announced she was, in custody. So it's, two sets of laws in this country. I'm sure if they had you or me on some trumped up charges or something, they would be posting our picture all over the damn place.
Yep, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that, and definitely appreciate you making the effort to just make the phone call, because just one of my, I guess, pet peeves with the independent media, many people, is sometimes people are just repeating the things that we hear in the mainstream, and not actually making the effort to say, send out an email, make a phone call, actually check to find out, these things. Obviously we can expect or suspect whether or not we're being told the truth, but the point is you made the effort to actually see, and you got some information, and that's more than most people. And we haven't seen a picture, so people are obviously skeptical, but we're going to go ahead and leave it there for the moment, brother. I wanted to show everybody, you can follow Spiro on Twitter. I'll put these links are already below the video you're watching right now, actually, but you can follow him on Twitter, YouTube, of course, but don't expect him to be on those platforms for very long. Unfortunately, he's doing very well, but that's usually around the time YouTube starts to have a problem with you. So make sure to follow him over at BitChute as well. And again, those links are down in the video below. Anything else you'd like to say, brother?
Just looking forward to tomorrow, the Expose Bill Gates Day, and I think it's a fantastic idea. Last time it was extremely effective. It was trending on Twitter, despite we know how Twitter likes to mess with the algorithms there and what's popular and what they want you to see. So I think it's great. It was a great idea. I'm looking forward to it tomorrow, and then, like you said, people, it doesn't just mean sit there on Twitter all day and keep hitting hashtag expose Bill Gates. You get out in the streets too. Like you're getting out, you're going to be hitting the streets. I think it's a great idea, and just everything that we can do to resist and be as independent from the system of control as we can, because time is short. I mean, this is the most important time of our lives right now, in my view, and we might not get a second crack at it. So let's give it our best shot.
So absolutely. Thank you so much, Spiro. Everybody, appreciate you listening wherever you're watching. Please do visit theconsciousresistance.com. You can watch this interview again, and you can find lots more content. Until next time, remember, we have to be the answer. We have to be the ones we're waiting for. And you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.